On TV, DNA tests seem to be ironclad proof. Yet across the country, that scientific evidence isn't enough, leaving some men on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars in child support for children who are not their own. Take this case in Texas recently, where a man proved with a DNA test that a 16-year-old girl isn't his daughter, yet the court has ordered him to pay $65,000 in back support. Why? In 2003, the man's ex-girlfriend went to court to claim he was the only possible father to her child. The state began assessing child support payments, garnishing his wages, she says, but the child's mother says he never fought. So then comes the DNA test, which proves that he is not, in fact, the father, but the court says his inaction was enough to establish a claim, and they're going to continue collecting child support. Carnell Smith went through a similar battle. He joins us now on the story with his attorney, Randy Kessler. Good to have both of you with us. So, Carnell, walk us through what happened with you.
Well, what happened to me was very similar to Gabriel. And with the exception that when I was, my former daughter was 11 years old, I found out after a child support hearing that she was not my daughter and that the mother knew about her boyfriend being the father. I thought that was a horrendous thing to happen.
And so at that point, you had already, once you were told this was your daughter, you said, okay, she's my daughter. I'm going to take care of her. I'm going to make those payments. I know you actually established a relationship with her that lasted those 11 years.
Yes, right.
What happened to those tens of thousands of dollars that you paid in child support for this young girl who was not, in fact, your daughter?
Well, the mother fought vehemently to keep the money, and the court would only sign off on releasing me if I waived my right to sue her for recovery.
Randy, how does that happen?
Well, you know, the law is changing, but the first victim is the child. So courts always want to protect the child. They don't want to take money back from the child's parent, only parent, until they can get their money from the real parent. And so, you know, this was a new thing back then when Carnell went through it. You know, the first time there was blood tests. Now it's easy to do. He finds out that it's not his child. Carnell's the kind of person that you want to represent if you're a lawyer. He was a gold star client. He said, all right, we didn't win it at trial. We're going to appeal it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And beyond that, he's now gone out and passed laws in a lot of states, not in Texas yet, that lets men get off the hook if they are not the father. So the law is changing. But, you know, this was a new issue back then, and the law follows these social trends. So he was unfortunately one of the first people to suffer from this law. But at least he found out that it wasn't his child before some men who find out now at age 40 or 50, because when they did it back 30, 40 years ago, you couldn't do DNA testing by saliva.
Yeah. So that has changed so much. The science has changed. As you point out, Randy, it's so much more readily accessible. Some of these laws, though, go back, as I understand it, in some states, hundreds of years in terms of child support and being responsible for a child you're told is yours. So when you say it's not being changed in some states, what's the resistance in some of those areas?
Well, you know, society wants to have continuity and consistency. Think about this. Children born during a marriage are presumed to be children of the marriage. And as a divorce lawyer, I can tell you there are a lot of children born to a marriage that were fathered by somebody outside of the marriage. That's because as a society, we think it's nice to have an intact family, have a marriage, have it look and smell and feel great. But that's really not what reality is. And, you know, the thing is, a woman who has a child by someone else is not going to really want to tell the guy, especially if she's married to him or dating him. It's embarrassing. It may not be what she wants to know. So when does she ever tell him? Well, not when they're getting a divorce, because then it proves, you know, adultery. So it's got a lot of issues. It's a multi-layered issue.
No incentive for her to tell either. There's no reason to tell.
You know, we represent a lot of athletes, and if it could be the rich athlete or some other guy, who's going to pay higher child support? There are a lot of wrong motivating factors to say he was the father.
So Carnell, when you learned about this, and I believe at the time that the young girl who you thought was your daughter was 11 years old, as you're going through this whole process, as I pointed out, you had really established a relationship with her. What happened to that relationship?
The sad part about it is that for a guy to continue a relationship with the child, he's at the mercy of the child's mother. So when the mother said, I could only continue the relationship if I was still willing to pay, that was an tenuous situation that I couldn't agree to. It was pay or go to jail, and I could not afford to let my newborn babe and my wife become homeless.
And that's a tough situation for a lot of men. I mean, Carnell, I know, struggled with it. And there are a lot of men that, you know, ultimately they don't challenge it because they don't want to have to go through that. But he had a new wife and a new child, and you know, couldn't afford both.
Yeah,
it's a lot to think about, and the kind of thing that never really comes up, that you don't think about until all of a sudden you see these numbers and you learn about this reality. Carnell Smith, Randy Kessler, appreciate both joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.